All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Off Axis podcast. I'm here with Nicole. She's an entrepreneur out of Reno. Nicole, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Great. And what's your last name, by the way?
Taggy.
Taggy?
Yeah.
Cool. And so you are the owner of VVS Models, and our good friend Dylan Broadway kind of connected us.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, let's get started on your background. How did you get to Reno? Where are you from? Let's start with that.
Okay. So I'm from Auburn, California. Born and raised. And after I graduated, I pretty much was like, I need to go somewhere. I need to do something different. And I wanted to go, down south. I wanted to be by the beach, but it was way too expensive at the time. I wasn't, I was just making not enough money at a restaurant, making tips. I was like, okay, I got to figure something else out because this isn't working for me. Reno was like the closest but farthest thing away to just get out and do something different. And so that's kind of how I ended up there. We ended up just, me and my best friend at the time, we found it like a really cheap place to live, and it just kind of worked out, and then we ended up staying there. And then I started working pretty much full time through Victoria's Secret. And I just kind of started establishing myself there, and then one opportunity after the other kind of presented itself. So just kind of didn't expect to stay here. It just was like originally move out, to get somewhere else. But
okay, so talk to me about how did you get connected with Victoria's Secret? Did you work at the store, or did you?
Yeah.
Is that how you started?
Yeah. Honestly, it's funny because as soon as I turned 16 and my parents were like, okay, you got to find a job. And I was like, all right. That was like the only place I could see myself working. I was like, I'm only going to work at Victoria's Secret.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I went to go apply when I was 16, they were like, well, unfortunately, you have to be 18. And I literally was like, well, where else am I supposed to work? And they're like, well, sorry, come back in 2 years. And I was like, oh, okay. So, obviously, like, I found plenty of other jobs, but I was just essentially, like, waiting until I could work at Victoria's Secret. So then when I moved to Reno, that was the first place that I went, is Victoria's Secret.
Like in the mall?
18. Yeah, the outside mall here at the Summit. When I did my interview for that job, it was really awful, and I didn't have any confidence, and it was like a group interview, and I was really scared to say anything about myself or kind of speak up. So I definitely didn't necessarily stand out from the rest of the candidates that were being interviewed. But I think at the very end of my interview, I said basically something along the lines of like, you're not going to regret hiring me. Like, I have a lot to offer. And then, so I think she was like, okay, interesting. So long story short, I got the job. And then I was there for about 5, almost 6 years with Victoria's Secret. That was my main home store, but I worked in a couple other locations and stuff. I was kind of like fluctuating around, but, and then when that manager left, she told me at that time, it was like the end of like my 4 years or something like that. She kind of like pulled me aside, and she was like, you know what, when I hired you, I thought you were going to last 2 weeks. And I was like, yeah, I kind of figured. So I was like, that's why I made the comment that I made, because I knew that I didn't have like the speaking like connection at that time, or like I didn't have the confidence.
Yeah.
But I knew what I had to offer. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then it ended up paying off. So I was there for a long time.
That's funny. So my first job was actually at Hollister too. Same exact thing.
I worked there
Group
too.
interview and everything.
Yeah.
I was by far the worst employee they could have ever hired. I figured out after like my second week that I could that no one knew who I was. There were so many people that they had hired that I eventually figured out that I could go in, log in, leave, come back, log out, and they would have no idea. And I did that for about a week.
Oh my
and they
gosh.
never caught me or anything.
Wow.
And then I just stopped going, and I was like,
You're like,
that's what you get for hiring a skate park kid who's 16 years old, though.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I worked there for 3 months, and it wasn't really my cup of tea, so I
yeah.
didn't stay very long. But yeah, that's
And what
way
was
to
your
work the system.
yeah, what was your second job? So then you were like 21 or so when you finished at Victoria's Secret?
No. So, I mean, I started Victoria's Secret when I was like 19.
19?
I'm trying to think. Either 19 or 20. So about 25, I'd say, I left. And then I went on to be a store manager at Pandora. I was a store manager at Coach. A lot of other just kind of head management jobs. But then during those time frames, I was always working in the nightlife industry too.
Okay.
So I was always working full time and then also nightlife on top of it.
Nightlife as in like a cocktail server or a go-go dancer or what?
All of it.
All of it?
So I started as a promo model, and then I was a go-go dancer, and then I was a cocktail for about a year. I didn't love it, and I kind of knew that, like, going into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them that also because they really wanted me to be a server, and I kind of was like, I don't think you want me to be a cocktail server. And then they're like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, we do. And I'm like, no, but I just know it's not going to be like my cup of tea. Like,
Yeah.
I just knew it's not going to be the place for me. And so I did that for a year. I saved a lot of money, which was awesome. But I was like, yeah, this isn't the position for me. And then I started my company not too long after that. So.
Okay, so that was my next question was what was like the defining moment that made you want to get into entrepreneurship?
I mean, essentially, someone gave me the idea. You know, they were like, you do all these things and you know exactly what you're doing and you know the ins and outs. You have a vision for it. You're good at it. You're good with people. You have all this background. They were like, why don't you just have your own? And I kind of like that. It was like an epiphany moment. And I was actually in Miami.
Yeah.
When that happened. So it was actually my boyfriend, Owen, who we were on vacation and we were talking about it. And he was just like, why don't you just have your own? And I was like, I don't know. I just never thought of it, you know? Like, I never, like, just did, I don't know. I've always been the worker.
Yeah.
Which, like, yeah, I'm a great worker. But, and I know deep down, too, like, I have it in me to run my own and do it better, you know?
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like that moment that was like, I should have my own.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like just trickled down from there, like having that moment. And then he helped me put a logo together. And as soon as I saw the logo, it was over. I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like,
Yeah.
This is awesome. This is mine, you know? So it was like, okay, we like saw the logo. Then I kind of just threw up an Instagram and then it all just started becoming real, you know,
Yeah.
like just seeing the logo and like, and piecing it all together and then starting to build the platform. And then it got like crazy exposure, like off rip. So I was like, okay, this is it. Like this is something, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, this is not only just something, but like I had a meaning behind it too, because I've always wanted to have a platform or something that I can help others in a sense, you know, like no matter what it is in their life, like having something that they're like, okay, like this is my place and I feel safe here and I feel good about this. And that was something that like I kind of incorporated into VVS, that I was like, you know, I've seen a lot of other companies do it. I've seen, you know, good things, bad things, obviously, just like anything. And there were just certain things that I saw and I was like, you know what? I feel like, especially in this industry with women, it's like obviously you're dealing with a bunch of beautiful women, and I feel like was getting kind of lost and just being like, okay, like you're here to work, you come and you go, and that's it. And I was like, I want this to have more purpose to it. And I want the women to feel like they come to work and they feel good about themselves and they're happy and they're like, okay, this is kind of like my release. This is my place to be, like, you know, after my work day during the week or after whatever it is that I'm doing or whatever they're building on. Like, I want it to be a place where they can come and they can say like, okay, these are my girls. This is my place. Like, I don't have to worry about anything and I'm safe.
Yeah. And
when I was doing promo and go-go stuff, I didn't necessarily feel like I had that as much. It was kind of just like, okay, you know, it felt just more objectified, I guess, in a sense of, you know, just like a regular retail. Essentially, like you're replaceable. They treat you as you're replaceable. And then that's kind of how it felt. And I was like, I don't want it to feel like that. Like, everyone is still a person and everyone is still human. You know, like we should, like, there should be able to be a balance of having, you know, sticking to guidelines and sticking to rules and holding people accountable, but then also treating them like a human being and treating them like with respect and making sure that they feel good about who they're working with and like what they're doing.
Okay. So it seems like you've had like one direct path of entrepreneurship, meaning you jumped in and like you've basically started the modeling business and that's all you've done so far, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of people ask me, like, how did you start your business and, like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, first thing you gotta do is, like, start a business. It doesn't really matter what it is. Like, imagine standing on a dock and you see this buoy and that's your goal and you have to get to that buoy.
Yeah.
Well, I jumped in right away and I took all these wrong paths. Like, I started a clothing line and then I realized I don't even really like clothing. So then I like swam the wrong direction. And then I like swam the other direction. I was like, oh, maybe I'll do a social media business. And that got me really close. And then I made a lot of money off the social media business, but I was like, I still don't really want to do this. And then I landed with footwear company. So like, I always tell people, I'm like, you just have to jump in, because even though like mine wasn't a direct path, like I've made so much more progress than you have, because you're still standing on the dock.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, is the water cold, or like, should I jump in? And you're still second guessing.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, like, the easiest thing for you to start is like a YouTube channel or something. That's the easiest business in my opinion. And for me, like, YouTube is like the glue that holds everything together. It's like the funding that I will constantly have in. It's like passive income. It's also ways to market your business. And there's so many benefits of having a YouTube channel. So for me, like, YouTube was kind of the thing that, for one, got my first show booked. It's where I sell the majority of our footwear off of. And it's like the passive income that like holds my business together.
That's
so
awesome.
Even though my path wasn't direct, I've been like bumping into all kinds of walls and stuff. We finally got there. But yours seems like it's like you knew what you wanted and pretty much right, like, you got there, right?
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. I mean, you know, obviously there still have been, you know, a couple obstacles and difficulties, and it's definitely not linear. You know, like everyone always says, like, business isn't linear. Like, you're always going to be doing the back and forth ups and downs. Like, you're going to fail and you're going to, you know, like, you can't be afraid of failing. Like you're saying, like, you just kind of have to go for it.
Yeah.
And then if it fails, then you're like, okay, you kind of backtrack and you look at it and you're like, all right, what was working? What didn't? Do I like what I'm doing? And I just maybe wasn't approaching it correctly. You know, you just can't give up. You can't just throw it in and be like, okay, well, that didn't work, so that's whatever, you know?
Yeah, you just got to keep going.
Yeah. But for me, I mean, I feel like I've been more lucky or blessed in the sense of that everything that I'm doing leading into my business, it looks like it's short-term and linear to most people.
Yeah.
But in the long term, I've worked my way up in everything that I've been doing, and then it just kind of led into my business, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I've put in the last 10 years of work to be where I am.
Yeah.
So I think, and that's what I kind of do struggle with sometimes. Like, people will look at me and they're like, oh, you just get whatever you want, and like, you know, people just like you, or whatever, like whatever assumptions that they make based on like what they see. But at the end of the day, it's like, no, I mean, I've been working in the industry for 8 years, like, myself.
Yeah.
And I've literally seen the ins and outs, what it takes, what do you need to do. I know what they want. I know, just, I think also another thing that is an assumption, like being in the nightlife industry, is like, oh, you party all the time. Like, oh, you probably are out all the time and you're partying and you're doing these things. I'm like, it's actually the opposite. Like, the only reason I am where I am is because I wasn't doing those things.
Yeah.
And if I was, I wouldn't be here. Like, if I was out, after the nightclub every night, like going out to the strip club or going out to another bar and like drinking and partying all the time, like I definitely wouldn't be where I am right now. And I think that's another thing that people don't really like realize is like I essentially was always the person that would turn things down like that. And then I was always kind of like the black sheep in a sense that was, people are like, oh, she never wants to hang out. She never wants to do anything. And then I think people thought that was weird too. But essentially it was just because I was focused on my work. Because I was working during the day full time, and then I'd go to the nightclub, and then I'd go home, go to sleep, and then do it all over again.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that for the past 8 years.
Yeah.
So it's like people will see it as like a short-term linear, like, oh, you just popped out of nowhere and it's great. But it's so much more than that. So, for everybody, there's always, you only see like the golden moments, like when people are at the top, and then everybody sees it as like, well, how did they get there? But they don't see that overall years put in, whatever it is they were doing behind the scenes, or whatever it was that they were doing, like putting in that work to get where they are. Like, it's very rare, or if not at all, that somebody just like pops out of nowhere and they're like, okay, I made it. You know what I mean? Like, sure. It doesn't.
Yeah. And for me, it was like, I started a business and then I was like, okay, LA is way too expensive for me to be able to like make enough money to get by and still fund my business.
Yeah.
And I had started the stunt show and I moved to Las Vegas. I was like, man, I really want to start a footwear company because there's no acrobatic footwear company. But it was like $25,000 to get started. And I was like, uh-oh. So like, how am I going to do this? Like take out another business loan or something? So what a lot of people don't see from me was I drove for Postmates for like basically 2 years, like 10 hours a day to fund that business. Cause I like took out this gigantic personal loan and then a business loan. And then all of a sudden my bills went from like a normal rent plus like another 500 for another 500 for all these loans that I took out.
Yeah.
So I was like stressing, like barely making enough money to get by. And people didn't see any of those hours. They just saw like the good part. They just like, how does he afford a footwear company and all that kind of stuff? So it's like the people who work in silent and like don't tell people what they're doing. You're just doing it on your own, and you have to. It's rough. I remember sitting there on my computer. I was like, man, like I'm doing all these stunt show sales, but what if I don't book anything? And I didn't book anything. I booked the first show we booked was Nickelodeon, and then which is like still probably the biggest one we've ever booked.
Yeah.
But I didn't book anything for like 6 months after that.
Wow.
And I was sitting there like, am I driving around for Postmates forever? Or like, am I ever going to book something?
Exactly.
And then finally, it was like, one of my favorite sayings is, success is where preparation and opportunity meet each other. And I was sitting there like, man, I am so prepared right now. Where's my opportunity? And then they just started coming over and over and over. And then I always operate with the mentality of say yes to everything and figure it out later. Because I originally took this circus tour, which is how I met Dylan originally. He like auditioned for the show, and I was like, it doesn't pay that well, but like you have to start somewhere, you know? And once you do one show, at least you have that client in the future, and then you can always use that client and then find other ones. At least you have some kind of money coming in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I essentially kind of do the same thing. It's like, if an opportunity presents itself, then I'm just like, okay, yep, we're doing it. We'll make it happen. And I mean, give or take too, you can run into, obstacles by doing that as well. But I mean, at the same time, you kind of just have to make it happen. Like, you just have to have that willpower. You got to just figure it out, You know what I mean? Like everything always ends up working out for the most part too. Or if it doesn't work out, then everything happens for a reason. You know, there's a reason it didn't work out, or, you know, then that's the universe telling you to redirect and to repurpose. Like, okay, what do I need to do, or where do I need to put my focus now, or whatever it may be. But I definitely think that being an entrepreneur, it's definitely like just you just got to dive in.
Yeah.
And
one of my favorite other sayings is the best way to be good at business is just to be in business.
Yeah.
And like, for example, I learn all kinds of things throughout the day. Like, I never thought I would be fluent in importing goods from China, or sales, and like all kinds of stuff that comes with it. Especially if you are the sole owner of the business and you're running the day to day, there's so many things that, like, website design and like marketing, and you're going to learn all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think of it as like going to college, basically, because I didn't go to college.
That's so funny that you said
right away,
that, because I actually, like, it popped into my mind, like, literally yesterday or the day before. I was like, basically, essentially, like, what we end up doing as entrepreneurs is just educating ourselves. Like, and that's why I feel like I never went to school, because I'm like, anything that I want to learn, I can learn myself. Anything that I want to figure out, I can figure out for myself. And like, yeah, school helps you and aids you and like gives you those tools, but at the end of the day, you're essentially doing the homework for yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, I don't know, that was kind of like an epiphany for me the other day too. I was like, why would I, you know, pay all this money, take out a loan for school, when I could pay all this money for a loan for my business and then do the homework myself?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, most people who go to school for business, or I kind of laugh when people tell me they go to school for entrepreneurship. I'm like, you can't go to school for that. Like, it's not a teachable thing. You either are or you aren't, or you have to learn how to be. But going to school and reading a book, that's the opposite. That's like doing someone else's homework. Like, school doesn't really teach you anything.
Exactly.
And anything you need to learn is on YouTube. I've learned just about everything that I know about business from either audiobooks or YouTube channels.
Yeah.
But like, I don't need to learn like the science and rock and roll and all that other stuff that like goes with college. Like, what's up with I don't need to go to algebra class. I forgot everything I knew about algebra already.
Yeah, exactly. Like, numbers are not my thing. And essentially, like, yes, in business, you know, you have to be somewhat skilled in numbers and, you know, running things like that. But for the most part, I don't need to know any intricate equation, like, for what I do. Like, you know, I have my QuickBooks, and I can do the basic math that I need to, you know, to crunch numbers and things like that. I don't need anything special for that. But, you know, same thing with, like, some people, to me, it only really makes sense to go to school if, you know, if you're a doctor, or if you're a surgeon, or something in those terms of, like, you actually need to go through those experiences, or they need to put you through school to give you a degree to show that you're certified to do those things. But entrepreneurship is completely different. Entrepreneurship is your own schooling. It's you know, there's no right or wrong way to do it either. You know, like, all the tools that I use to motivate myself or to be in the place that I want to be might be different than the tools that you use. Like, everyone's just their own individual, and that's the whole point of being an entrepreneur, is like, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just, if you have it, you have it. And if you don't, you don't. And I think also for me, you know, there are a lot of struggles that I deal with. And it's more so that, you know, I can be too nice, or I can be too wanting to do things for people, or like give them all these things that they want. And then that's where I find my obstacles, is trying to find that balance and, you know, maintaining a business structure and rules and regulations, but then also still wanting to try to do as much as I can to give people what they're wanting and what they're asking for, whether it's like jobs or gigs or inspiration or like whatever it is. But, sometimes I can't always give all those things.
Yeah.
And then that's where the troubles come in, more so with my business, probably not with yours. It's probably different, because I have 27 or even up to like 50 girls between here and Sacramento, and always trying to make sure I'm responsive to them and like make sure I'm available for them, or it's definitely like that's the most difficult for me, because I want to be able to be there for them. But then as a business, you kind of have to find that separation, like, okay, like, yes, we work together, yes, we're friends, but we also have to maintain the line, like, I can't do everything for you. I can't, and I don't want to make anyone a priority over anybody else, like, we're all here for each other kind of thing. But as far as going back to what we were talking about, being an entrepreneur, it's just we all have our different struggles and how we deal with them.
Yeah.
And it's those are the hardest parts to get through for me. And there's been a lot of times where I want to give up, but then I think about it and I'm like, but why? I've gotten this far and I've worked this long and this hard to be where I am. So I know that there's a higher purpose for what I'm doing. And that's what kind of keeps me going with it too.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so when you say you have like 20 to 50 models at times, what is something that you look for when you are hiring models, or what are things that you look for that are red flags and probably shouldn't work with this person?
Okay. Well, actually, let's start with the red flags first. So red flags, when I'm hiring anybody, essentially, every so often I get a couple of those people who are like, I just want something easy and fun. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of a red flag. Because usually those same people are just the ones that, like, they want to make the money, they just want to show up and look the part, and then that's it. And I'm like, well, it's a lot more than that. Like, yes, I offer a multitude of things, but for the most part, it's more promotional modeling. And it's more than just looking pretty. You still have to be educated. You still have to show up at a timely manner, to your shift. You still have to be educated in the things that you're talking about, in a sense, whatever it is we're promoting or whatever venue that we're in. You still have to be presentable as a person, not just as a face. So that's kind of like my main red flag, is if they're like, I just want something easy and fun. And I'm like, okay, well, it's, it's still a lot more than that. When I'm looking for something positively, overall, I'm looking for people who genuinely, are just, whether they're trying to make more money and they're trying to work on themselves and their business, or, whatever career path they're trying to do. I'm really just looking for somebody who is a good person, inside and out. Like, I really am strongly valued on that. And I'm also looking for somebody who's a hard worker, who has work ethic, kind of like me, somebody who's always going to be willing to, show up even if they're like not feeling 100%, or somebody who is willing to pick up a shift for somebody else, just those very basic things. Not saying like they need to all the time, because that's not realistic, but just an authentic person who, doesn't want any drama, who isn't there to cause problems. Because you'd be surprised. It seems like people always want to find a problem when there doesn't need to be.
Oh, I know
and
all
I'm
about
like,
this one.
Yeah, and I'm like, there literally doesn't need to be a problem. Like, we're all here together. We're all in it together. We're all essentially, whatever it is we're doing, no matter what business it is or where you're working, we're all searching for like a higher purpose and a higher power in like the things that we're doing on our day to day. And, whether it's, working with me and making some extra money and then getting to your next destination, like, that's great. Like, that's, really what I'm looking for, you know, like I might not be able to change your life, like in the aspect of like, you know, making somebody like famous or a celebrity or, you know, something crazy like that. But, you know, doing the work with me and the people that you're working with is going to lead you to the higher purpose that you're looking for in your life, in your career path. So, I'm just, you know, as long as there's no drama, just everything's good.
Yeah, I always operate with the responsibility first and then skill, because obviously as acrobats you're looking for the most talented acrobats, but at the same time, if they do something like, for example, I've lost 2 of my biggest gigs due to acrobats being irresponsible on the job.
Yeah.
One of them, they lost their temper right in front of the client. It's pretty much gone after that.
Yeah.
The other one showed up 4 hours late to a 6-hour rehearsal for Nickelodeon.
Oh, wow. Oh.
When there was like all of the actors there and everyone was there, and I was like, I don't know, he's not answering his phone. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is really bad.
Yeah.
And then that same exact person decided to steal some of the t-shirts that they like shoot off in cannons and stuff, and I was like, why would you want those shirts in the first place? And then second, why would you do that?
Yeah.
And that same person also stole the wardrobe that they gave us, and I was just like,
oh my gosh,
yeah, we're not getting hired. And of course they never answered one of my emails ever again. So one person can screw it up for everyone else.
Exactly. Yeah, so that, because essentially the people that you're bringing onto your team are a reflection of you in a sense. So yeah, if there's one mess up, then it's like that falls back on you because you're the one that hired them, and that makes it really difficult as an entrepreneur, because you know, you can't always, like, you want to see the best in people and you want to think that they have the best intentions, but then, you know, sometimes you get blindsided and then you're like, whoa, I was not expecting that, you know, or, and then they, you know, usually those same type of people end up kind of coming back at you and then having animosity towards you, and then you're like, well, what do you mean? Like, I had all these good intentions for you, and like I had all these things set up for you, and like I saw the best in you, I gave you an opportunity, and then now like I'm the bad guy. Yeah. And it's like, wait.
Especially as the person in charge or the owner, people are always gonna talk bad about you. They're always gonna say things behind your back, and I notice it all the time. And then when like one thing goes wrong, they'll all team up on you, and it's like, okay, like I had that situation recently, and I was like, guys, you're replaceable. Like, I hate to say it, but I don't need you guys. So like the business is going to continue to move on. So it is what it is. And there's all these other things that go involved with like a business that people who aren't in business will never get. Like if someone hasn't invested anything in their entire life, it's like, oh yeah, you don't get it because you're that person that was afraid to make that like investment or take out that personal loan or something. So when, like, for example, I have this problem a few times already. People like to use my stage equipment and like all my professional equipment and then use it for business purposes, and like I had some friends that wanted to basically use my stage and audition for, like, basically try to sell this show to a different company and keep me completely out of the loop. And I was like, yo, guys, wait, you can't just use my equipment, make it look like you have all this professional stuff, and then like not include me on it. Like, just because I let you use it for free and stuff, that doesn't mean you can use it for profit.
Oh yeah, I've definitely seen my fair share of similar things. I mean, obviously I don't necessarily have equipment, but I've definitely had a lot of experiences with other companies in the area that, you know, kind of always try to go underneath me and, you know, go around and kind of do it the shady way. And it's kind of just, I mean, I guess it's a little funny in a sense, because I always end up, someone shows me or tells me, and they're like, hey, you know, this person's kind of trying to go around you or kind of take what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I mean, I guess maybe I should just look at it like in a positive note, like, well, obviously I'm doing something right because they're trying to sabotage it.
Yeah.
So, but it's also like in that moment, it's kind of like energy depleting. You know, you're kind of like, okay, why is this person doing this to me? I'm not trying to do anything to them. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. And so then that's kind of hard mentally because you just kind of have to push through it too and be like, okay, you know, like it's you know, it's not affecting me. Like if I put more energy to it, it will. So, you know, you just got to like keep moving on. And if people try to tear you down, it's just, you know, it's just part of the process, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah.
So I'm assuming sometimes things come up and you're not able to actually make the gig, or maybe you're double booked or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
How often does that happen, and what do you look for when you're hiring someone to manage that gig?
I mean, luckily I haven't had too many experiences where I wasn't able to fulfill a gig or book it or be there. But it has happened a couple times, actually more recently since COVID, because I've noticed too since COVID there has been a change in work ethic, which is interesting. Which I also understand too, but you know, people have different priorities now, and like the way that they view life and the way that they view like what their priorities are and things like that. So, I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, it's you know, it's kind of embarrassing, you know, like if you can't book something, but again, it's only happened like maybe 2 times. So I'm very lucky that that's the only times that it's happened. But in the moment, you just kind of have to be honest. And you're just like, you know, hey, and they understand, you know, like for the most part, if you're honest with them and you're communicating to them, and, you know, you just have to be honest and say, hey, you know, unfortunately, I'm not able to book this right now. It's a very rare occasion, you know, just being with all the things happening, or, you know, the holiday or the time period or whatever, you know, instances come into play, or if somebody's sick, you know, you can't really do anything about that. So you just got to be honest, and kind of, I guess, take the L is the best way to put it. Like, just take the L, be honest, and it is what it is. If they don't continue to book you after that, then you find new opportunities. But luckily I haven't experienced that either, where they didn't go forward with using me. Most of our work is contracted too, so it's, you know, if we can't fulfill like one thing, it's not the end of the world. It's really just being honest.
Yeah.
And then what was the second part of the question? It was
just when you're like looking for managers, like what kind of people are you looking for?
I mean, to be honest, I'm looking for someone like myself. I mean, in the best way.
Yeah.
To put that is like, because I know that if it was me, as a worker, like I'll always show up. I pretty much will never call in unless I'm absolutely dying or something crazy. I never call in. I always show up. I always make sure I'm there. I always make sure it's perfect. Like, you know, everything all around. So essentially, like, I'm looking for those girls who step it up and kind of like put themselves forward, and they're like, you know, and they usually express themselves to me. They're like, you know what, I really like what you're doing, and I want to be a part of it. And I have a lot of those girls that come to me, and they're like, you know, who have expressed interest in being a manager, or who have expressed interest in like wanting to be more involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be honest with them too, you know, like what I can offer, and, you know, what I'm looking for and things like that. But yeah, I mean, essentially I'm just looking for people who can like kind of reciprocate the work that I can put out.
Yeah. One of the books that I just finished reading a few weeks ago, it's called Your Next 5 Moves, and one of the main things that I took away from it was when you're trying to create great teams, what you want to do is treat your number one really, really well. So, for example, do you know who Conor McGregor is?
Yes.
Okay, so everyone in the UFC wants to be just like Conor McGregor because they all see how much money he's making and all the good things that the UFC does for this guy.
Yeah.
So they all strive and work really hard to basically get to that top position. And it goes the same way for any other business. Everyone's always going to look at that number one employee and see like, oh, look at all what they got. But if you don't have one person that's making that, or maybe like a few people, for example, like as a footwear company owner, I have one person right now with a signature shoe, and we're producing other signature shoes as well, which in turn I hope that makes the other athletes that are kind of like meh promoting us, like just a little bit, to actually like, man, if I was doing like a better job this time, and when they do see who comes out with signature shoes, they're like, well, that makes so much sense why they got that shoe. I should have been like working harder this whole time.
Yep.
Like things don't just get handed to you. So that's like one of the main things that I look for, or that I try to recreate as a business owner.
Yeah.
It's like treat your number one really well,
Yeah.
and the others will strive to be just like them, or they'll fall off and you won't see them anymore.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%.
Cool. I think that's all I have for you. I do have some questions I want to talk to you offline about.
Okay.
Anything else that you want to mention to all the models listening?
I mean, I probably have a lot more. Like once I think about it, since this is like my first ever podcast, so it's like kind of cool and kind of weird at the same time. But I think essentially at the end of the day, like we're all just here to help each other get to the point that we want to be in life.
Yeah.
And if we stopped making assumptions or assuming things or projecting things, and we just kind of stepped back and looked at each other as like a human being that's, we all have our struggles and we all have things that we're going through, then I think we would all be in a lot better place, especially after like COVID and all these things that we've been through. We're all just looking for a higher purpose. And I think that I really strive to give that to the girls and to give a safe place for them and to just give friendship and, whatever it is that they need in that time in their life. And, that's like my biggest goal is just to help people get to where they want to be.
Yeah, and it's like one thing that people don't understand that are like people that work is these opportunities don't happen if there's not a person like you who's creating those opportunities. What I like to think of is like entrepreneurs are people who are going to save the world, and they're the ones who are creating opportunities. If you weren't here, if you didn't have VVS Models, there wouldn't be all these opportunities for these other girls.
Yeah.
And it's not like these positions just get filled. It's one person who's creating their own path who creates opportunities for others on the way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Awesome. And how can everyone find you?
So you can find us on Instagram, vvs.models. We also have quite a few other branches of that as well, depending on what you're looking for, but that's our main page.
Okay, and does VVS stand for anything?
Yeah, so VVS Models, essentially, I got the idea from also when I was in Miami, when we were working on the logo and things like that. I was listening to music, and I like a variety of things. I like just about everything. But we were listening to a song, and it said VVS in it, and I was like, what's VVS? So I looked it up, and it was a highest quality diamond that you can buy. And I was like, I really like that. I like the idea that, it references back to like high quality, and then for me, so like people inside and out. And I also liked that it linked back to music because I like music a lot, and I like that I could kind of mix the two together, giving it kind of like a higher purpose, and then also being able to like relate it into mainstream things and music and things like that.
Okay,
So,
cool.
Yeah.
And So, and do you want to link out your personal Instagram as well?
Sure. It's inspired by Nicole, but inspired x Nicole.
So. And hopefully more people will be inspired by Nicole after this interview.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you.
And if you guys haven't yet, make sure you guys subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye, everyone.